Hello and welcome to another episode of the Deceptive Reality Podcast, where Bert is making a really mean look at Nick, and Nick is introducing himself, and the puckish, mischievous Bert.
You know what's crazy is when I do this, I can't see anything except for my eyebrows. Not that anyone can see this.
Oh, you look real mean.
But apparently that's the thing. Yeah, I know. That was my Scrooge face whenever I was doing Scrooge for the Christmas special.
Oh, that's what you were doing.
That's what I was doing.
You're a method actor.
Well, that's a whole lot better than what people say. So I'll take it. You said I was what this time, Nick? What am I?
Puckish. Which is
I thought you
mischievous.
called me pudgy for a minute.
Oh, no.
But then you said all these are always nice.
Yeah.
They're always nice,
who am I to be calling anyone pudgy?
I mean, listen, hey, I was like, listen, there's nothing wrong with little pudgy. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Nothing
But
wrong with that.
I think puckish, if I had to guess, and someone can tell me if I'm wrong, it's probably from the Shakespeare play A Midsummer's Night Dream, where Puck is the one who keeps pulling tricks on everyone. So puckish is mischievous, if I had to guess.
Puckish is
Or
mischievous.
if you're a kid around my age, or you were a kid when I was a kid, you might remember the cartoon Gargoyles that had Puck in it, which was awesome.
Yeah. I forgot about that till you just said that.
I love that.
Man, there's so many good cartoons back in the day.
Oh, I know. What a time to be around.
Yeah, they screwed up all the cartoons, unfortunately.
Anime's good though.
And freaking every Saturday had morning cartoons.
Yeah.
And then that stupid president screwed it all up. Doggone it. Oh, well. Well, obviously you saw part 1. Welcome to part 2. I told you in part 1, we didn't know where we was going to cut it and splice it and put it. Well, here we are. Now you don't have to question anymore. But guess what? It's been a week. I know your memory sucks. Okay? Talking to a few of you. Seth, I'm talking to you with your sucky memory. But watch this.
Maybe is it like dreaming where people sort of make up experiences, or what's your thoughts on that in particular?
I answered that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I said I think that science tries to make it into something that it's not.
Right.
But I think that there's something there.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be hard pressed for me to say that is fake, but then say that there's 2 and 3 dimensions. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
Like for me, I think that there's parts of our, well, I mean, here's a great example, right? So I think with the therapy, it's obviously going to be able to build on the whole entire idea and premise that there's things that we just can't remember. At the end of the day, it's almost absurd to think that there's not, because I mean, technically when we dream, right? That's going somewhere. It's coming from somewhere.
Interesting. He did go to a national park quite recently.
He did?
Yeah, a few times, I think.
That seems absurd to me, that after all that time out of nowhere,
Yeah.
just voila.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this about me. I think you probably might know this. I was a smoker.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, for about 5 years, maybe a little more.
And you just stopped cold turkey?
Well, what I did was, and you can leave this in, this is all good things. Like I smoked for 5 years, maybe a little more than that. A pack a day. So pretty
That's a pretty
devoted
heavy
smoker. Yeah. And the prices went up when I started.
There's something that you gotta have. For me, it's energy drinks. That's by far the hardest thing for me to kick.
Yeah, it is. Like, I'm comparing it to smoking. Way harder than giving up smoking, in my opinion.
Henry David Thoreau went on a trip to the woods in Maine. He left his home at Walden Pond and embarked on a 11-day adventure with a friend and a Native American guide in a birch bark canoe loaded with 166 pounds of gear. This journey took place in the area that is now part of the Allagash Wilderness waterway, a famous 92-mile canoe route in southern Maine. Thoreau wrote about his experience in a book called The Maine Woods, which was published after he passed away in 1864. Even though Thoreau enjoyed solitude, the absolute disconnection from other people in the Allagash Wilderness probably surprised even him. In his most famous work, Walden, Thoreau said, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach." Thoreau said he looked to wilderness to tell him if life was unkind or beautiful. In the Allagash Wilderness, he found it to be the latter.
They went hunting this last year, and when they went hunting, something happened that they had never experienced. They're up in their tree stands, and it's doing like this whooping call. It's like whoop, 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 whoop. But they're like coming from all over the place.
And that sounds like a Bigfoot to me.
Yeah, it's kind of what it sounds like, and that's kind of what they allude to. So they sent the file to some type of specialist in like audible things, because at first people's like, this is one voice, this is one person that's creating all this, and the audio expert came back and said no, like it's impossible. There had to be at least 10 or 15 of whatever this is. They said, really? What could this be? And they're like, we don't know what this is. And they said that it was almost as though it was a form of communication, is what they thought.
Yeah. Well, this sounds a lot like the Bigfoot. Now that we've got all that out of the way, which we covered a lot of topics there. Hypnotism, lost time, and that's all stuff that has happened already.
Yes.
Already happened in the story. Do you want to hear what happens next?
You best believe I do.
With the panic over, our small group decided to set off the following day. The wind had calmed down quite a bit, however, after paddling as hard as they could by canoe. For hours, the men were sure they had been staring at the same bush. They decided they would need to find another way to get up the stream, rather than fighting the abnormally strong current. They jumped out of the canoes and tied a rope to the front. They walked along the shore, dragging the canoes through the water, at quite some difficulty. By the end of the day, however, they managed to reach the portage area that would eventually connect to Eagle Lake. A couple of hours later, they reached the lake and paddled out to an island that Chuck had stayed on before, called Pillsbury Island. There was a campsite located on the island called Thoreau Campsite, as apparently the author had spent a significant amount of time there many years earlier. Sadly, another canoe was already landed on the island and was using the site. The group decided instead to stay at another location known as Smithbrook Campsite. Here they set up their camp for the evening and discussed where they would like to fish. Even though it was getting later in the evening, they decided to try to catch supper at the mouth of Smith's Brook, only 20 minutes away. Up in the Allagash, the nights get so very black that you can't see your hand placed in front of your face. The only way to make it back to your campsite is to have some kind of beacon. The men built a huge fire at their campsite that they knew they would be able to see from a long distance. They had planned to be back before night fell completely, but they knew in a wilderness like this it's best to prepare for all scenarios. When they arrived at the mouth of the brook, they knew they would be okay, as they could still see the fire they had lit. Their lures had no sooner broken the surface of the lake when Chuck drew the men's attention behind them. At first, they had no idea what had excited him so, as all they saw was the bright moon in the sky. This was not the moon. As they watched, it rose slowly out of the forest about 250 yards away. Suddenly, it stopped and hovered above the trees. They knew that this was the mysterious light from the other night. It had that same unplaceable quality of light. There was no sound, no buzz, no hum. It was large. Jack estimated it was as big in diameter as a tractor trailer is long. The men watched in stunned silence as the yellowish-white light moved over them. They noticed it was roiling, almost like it was alive. Charles slowly picked up the flashlight, and with his hand covering the lens, flashed the only signal he knew, SOS. The object stopped, and a beam of light dropped from the bottom onto the lake. The men paddled as fast as they could, but the beam was fast. It was chasing them. That was the sound of the front of their canoe hitting the shore in front of their campsite hard. The beam was gone, and the large object now hovered, still silent in the sky above them. Charles once again picked up the flashlight and signaled it just as he had before. This time, however, it moved away from them across the lake and slowly ascended into the sky. It then winked out. The men stood still in fear for who knows how long. What if the beam had caught them before they reached shore? What would have happened? As they turned back to the camp, they noticed their huge fire, lit only an hour before, had burned to ashes somehow. The men were puzzled but exhausted and went to sleep immediately. The very next day, they paddled out. On the way, they happened to meet a park ranger and explained their entire story. The ranger had also heard similar things from another group, but squinted at them oddly and said in a heavy Maine accent, "What you boys saw was them Hollywood searchlights. There's a new hardware store in town that just opened up and they have them there." The ranger would talk no further. From where they were, the town was 90 miles away, with Mount Katahdin a mile high in between. On their way back home, they told everyone they could think of their story and were met with the expected skeptical responses. After a while, they put the experience to the back of their minds and counted their blessings that they had made it out at all.
So there's a lot to unpack in that part there.
There's a lot to unpack in that one, Nick. I'm going to be honest. You can't create narratives like that because at the beginning, the way my brain works, I heard Pillsbury and I started thinking of cookies.
The Pillsbury Doughboy.
And that screwed me up. And then I'm like, Bert, you have to stop. You have to concentrate. And then the very next thing I hear is Thorough Campground. I'm like, well, someone was real original with that. And then I missed another entire segment, Nick. You can't do that.
Oh, did you lose time too?
I might have. There's a small part of me, though, that wants to add the Pillsbury Doughboy in our visual effects.
You could have him just going, or whatever he does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what he does.
Yeah. That's what he sounds like when he's getting probed by the aliens.
It really does. I bet he had some regression too.
I think you should replace that sound effect with every time you or I went and did that voice.
I really should.
Yeah.
You know, that was a lot to unpack though. So they're rowing.
Yeah.
And something I was going to say a couple segments ago,
right,
and I forgot. The fact that it was a yellow or a white light, there's not really anything that creates that, a yellow light.
Right. So they said it was roiling white and yellow. And one guy, I can't remember which one of them it was, but he apparently does pottery and stuff like that. And he says, like, sometimes you get a similar kind of effect when you superheat clay in a kiln. It'll give like a yellowy white roiling effect, like almost like it's alive kind of thing. And that's what he compared it to. But the rest of them were just like, you know, we can't place what this looks like. It doesn't look like anything we've seen before. And from the previous segment, that was like 7-8 witnesses in addition to these guys who saw this the night before. I forgot to mention that part.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Another interesting part, and I don't think I could convey it in the narrative, but the fire they built, they had built it really high. Like they were saying it was as high as a person and it was meant to last, you know, almost throughout the night so they could see it from other parts of the lake.
Interesting.
But somehow it burnt to ashes and went out in under an hour by their reckoning.
That doesn't make any sense. That's not even close.
Right, exactly. So like a lot of stuff going on there. I really was mystified that guy did SOS to it, had that violent, scary reaction, and then did it again too.
Yeah. That's weird.
But what do you think would have happened if the light had caught them?
Almost every single time that I've heard of these lights, that's always typically when there's some form of abduction.
Right.
Which makes me wonder, what is it about the light that causes that?
Now, I've always pictured it, and maybe this is just like science fiction. I always pictured the light as that sort of beams you up or holds you in place or something like that. That's how I've always pictured them.
That could be. That could be. I guess I always think, in fact, I think if you look, I got the little light.
Yeah, see, it's beaming someone up right now.
It's beaming someone up. That's what I'm saying. For anyone that's listening, obviously, exactly. I apologize. I got a shirt. I had to change shirts when all this was happening since I knew we were talking about alien abductions. Yeah. And it says on my shirt,
because you thought it was going to be ghosts.
Leave. I did. You're really disappointed.
I can relate
I think
to
that's
that.
The second one I've gotten wrong.
I'll have to just ask you in advance. I'll be like a couple days before. So what shirt are you planning on wearing on podcast day? And then you just hear, like, you tell me, oh, I'm wearing a Bigfoot shirt, and you just hear furious erasing.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So this is another part of the scene I wanted to paint for you. Like, have you ever been to, like, even around here, and this is sort of a small town, there's not a lot of places you can get to where there's like zero light pollution.
Yeah.
Like, there's almost none. And
yeah, it's difficult.
I happened upon one, I think like 2 or 3 years back. And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen it this dark before. And then I looked up because there was no sky pollution, and you could see like the cloudy sort of parts of the nebula and stuff that we look up, like parts of our Milky Way.
Oh, wow.
And I'd never seen that. I didn't know that you can see that with the naked eye until that moment.
Well, I know, like, unfortunately, I live outside of a major city, Columbus. And my parents live about 45 minutes out from here.
Okay.
And if you look at light pollution, and they live in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
But if you look at light pollution, their light pollution is better than mine. But because Columbus is so bright,
yeah,
they still have some of the overcast from that.
Yeah. Well, I went like 30 something years of my life not knowing it could get that dark.
Yeah.
Like, it's so rare. But out here, you have to fly away from civilization, and then they've paddled 2 days or maybe a little more than that into the middle of nowhere. And they're saying that literally it gets so dark there that on a moonless night, you can hold your hand up in front of you and not see it. So,
wow, that's insane.
Yeah. And I believe it. Because I know there's still darker places than that place I went to. In fact, we've got a dark sky natural wonder or something like that here, where supposedly it's one of the darkest places you can go on Earth and view the night sky, at a place called Trout Point Lodge.
I've got a app because for telescopes, the darker the better.
Yeah.
Because light pollution's a real thing with telescopes. Like, it's bad. And I've got an app that will tell me the light pollution around. And I'm always amazed with how far I would have to travel to have it not pollute.
Like, how far would you have to get real darkness?
Like, you guys can't necessarily see this. And obviously anyone that does not listen, like, you're not going to be able to tell exactly where I live. It's not like I'm doxing myself here.
Yeah, please don't.
But like you can see,
wow.
I'm right outside. I'm in orange versus the red.
There's no darkness there whatsoever.
No.
I'm surprised it's not daylight all the time there.
Well, and here's what's funny, right? If I zoom all the way out, we're talking all the way out, you can still see, like that's, you can see Florida. Let me see. Come on, zoom in. You can't. There we go. That's Florida at the bottom. So it's not until really you get up into Canada that it gets darker.
That's crazy.
And it's like, if I look up into like Canada, there's a lot of dark areas versus what we deal with.
Oh yeah. We're spread out populace.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. It just goes to show in the US, good luck. There is a little spot, it looks like in West Virginia. And my guess is you're going to have to go out in the middle of nowhere. It's near Grantsville. That's probably the closest to me that I could go. But my guess is I'd probably die from some type of wild animal.
That's where them Sam Squanches are. They'd get you.
For sure. Like if I look in the entire state of Ohio, there's light pollution everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd have to go to another state to get darkness.
That's wild.
Yeah. So I'm pretty much screwed. Now for telescopes, we do have filters that drastically helps.
Yeah. I imagine it would still be better if you could get to a dark area though.
1000%. Yeah. It's significantly different.
All right. So what I'm going to do here is let me lay out the scene for you. We're going to role play this out.
Okay, I'm ready.
We've gone camping with our two buddies. They're the same people that we talked about in that other episode that would help us steal that electronic equipment.
Perfect. They're our kind of people.
Yeah, so there's 4 of us out there and we're like, okay, it gets real dark here. By the time it gets dark, we're not going to be able to see our hands, but we want to go just to the mouth of that brook. It's about a half hour away. Okay.
Sounds fair.
Let's build a giant fire. We build the giant fire. It's about the height of us. We want it to burn all night, right? We light it. We paddle for a half hour. We get to the brook and no sooner do we put our bobbers in the water to catch fish, and one of the guys behind us is like, what the heck is that? And we look and it's a giant UFO. Giant thing. It's as big around as a tractor trailer is wide or long, I guess is what I'd say. So one of our buddies, the not so bright one, the one who would probably go to jail first from stealing that equipment.
Seems legit.
And probably the guy who wanted to throw our couch into the vortex.
Into the vortex? Seems legit.
If you haven't watched this other episode, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but you should watch that one too.
You should watch the other episode with Madman Markham.
That's right. So he takes his flashlight and he points it at the big scary thing. And he's like, SOS, SOS. And all of a sudden, whoa, big light, big beam goes down on the lakes and it's rapidly coming towards us. So what do? We're like, we got to get the heck out of here. We paddle.
Did
right?
we get our bobbers out of the water?
We left them. They're only like 50 cents a piece. It's all right. Or maybe they're dragging behind. It's fine.
Perfect. That's better.
Yeah. We don't want to lose the rods too.
No.
So we paddle. And this thing's coming too fast. It's going to get us. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, slam, we hit the shore. The thing stops. The light's gone suddenly. It hovers there. The guy flashes it again for I don't know what reason. And then it leaves. Suddenly we notice our campfire that's supposed to burn probably like 8 hours or however long, a long time. It's just cold ashes. So we're like, okay, well, whatever. There's two things in that story I just told you that don't add up. One of them is easy to point out. The other one might not be so easy. Do you know what they are?
Well, Well, I caught the fact that we rode out for 30 minutes and then we were instantly back to the shore.
Right. Because if that thing
Here's
was
one
coming at
problem.
us fast, I doubt we could outrow it for half an hour.
Correct. The second one was we saw the UFO and then the UFO was gone.
Right.
The third thing is the fire was aglow and now it's cold ashes.
Right. So
There's a loss of time.
our timeline's not adding up. There's definitely things. But, I mean, whether it's blocking things out or we just think we got lucky, we're like, whew, man, I'm glad with that light didn't catch us somehow. We must have been paddling like demons to get there that quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird that the
That
fire
light did
burned
catch
down.
us.
That's what I'm thinking. But that's not
How
what
do you
they
not
thought.
question that though? That makes no sense.
Right.
That'd
They
be the
thought
first
they
thing I would
escaped
think.
it. Well, you know what the difference is? We're really well versed in like abduction stories and all that kind of stuff. These guys, I don't think they knew much about it at all.
You know what it makes me think of though?
What?
It's like when you have to have a medical, whatever it be, right? And they give that anesthetic, you don't remember anything that occurs.
Right.
So where does those memory go?
That's a good question. And is this the same thing that causes our UFO
Right.
memory loss? Anesthetic.
Because, you know, maybe they're giving us some form of anesthetic,
Right.
which would explain it.
Right.
And we're primitive. Like they look at us like we're just monkeys, like we're
Yeah.
idiots.
They're like when a kid like gets a bug in a jar and drops in a cotton swab with alcohol on it to knock them out
Yes.
or whatever, you know? Really bad
Right.
for the insect, but
Correct.
we don't care about that.
No.
Well,
It does make me think that way though, because
Yeah.
like with anesthetic, that's literally what happens. You remember being wheeled into something
right.
and you remember maybe an hour after you've been awoken from your anesthetic. Like you don't even remember when you wake up from your anesthetic the first time for probably an hour after.
Yeah. Like, is there, like, I've never been through this, but do you immediately remember what your whole situation was? Or are you sort of like, I don't even remember why I came here or anything like that?
When you first wake up,
Right.
you don't really remember.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, as time goes by, you're like, man, yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe I don't remember any of that. But
Yeah.
thankfully, I don't.
Right.
Like the people that always does the weird stuff when like they get their wisdom teeth and stuff like that out. And they don't ever remember being like
Right.
they were.
Like loopy and
What if,
telling weird stories.
yeah, what if we go up into something and then whatever their anesthetic is, right? Like I'd have to assume maybe it's a completely different, way that they administer it.
Right. But just like our anesthetic, it's not perfect. Some people wake up during surgeries. Some people remember parts of it, and that seems to be the kind of thing that happens during these abductions.
Because
So
I'm curious if maybe someone can, like, under hypnosis,
Right.
bring back memories from like
A
anesthetic
surgery or something.
experiences. Yeah,
That's a good question. I never thought about that.
because I thought about like
don't recall
hypnosis
everyone.
people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would want to remember, but I'm curious if they could, if they wanted
Right.
to. I have heard cases where people has hypnotized people and they've went through medical things and never had any anesthetic.
Oh, really? Well, that's quite interesting.
Yep, I've heard of that also.
I doubt anyone's ever tried to recall memories from a surgery. But I'd be interested to know what the results of that would be.
Yeah, me also.
It
I would be
would
super
suck,
curious about
but for science, someone should do that.
I mean,
Well,
For
have you had
science,
surgery?
man. I had not since I was a kid. I had my appendix and my adenoids taken out.
Oh, okay. Well, you were put out for those things, right?
Correct.
Oh, well, that's what you got to get hypnotized for. I've never had it done, so it's got to be you this time.
We'll both be on our own couches, Nick.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm glad I'm me and not you, because yours is going to be way worse. I have a feeling.
We don't know, Nick.
Yeah, mine's going to be just like,
we don't know.
They're going to be like, tell us what you remember of that time you lost all those hours. And I'm just going to be like, I was tired and stupid. The end. And yours is going to be like mind-numbing, screaming pain. Just kidding.
I don't know if you ever remember this TV show. It was called Mad TV.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Stuart?
Uh-huh.
Now, Stuart, you get over here, Stuart.
No.
I can imagine you're regressing back, and they're like, no, UFO, no.
Yeah.
No.
Look what I can do.
Like maybe that's your case. Look what I can do.
They're like, well, we're not keeping this guy for very long.
Not keeping this one. Yeah. That's why they took you right back to where that truck was.
Yeah, that's right.
They're like, here you go.
Yeah,
you can have
we've
him.
had enough of that.
Oh, interesting one.
Yeah, interesting case here. We're definitely not writing this down.
Wouldn't it be crazy if we both did hypnosis? You didn't have anything, and then they tried to bring my memories back, and I was the one abducted?
That would be
How crazy
wild.
would that be?
That would be wild.
That'd be wild. I don't know if I would like that, but that would be wild.
That could be. That could be.
It would explain a lot, really.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
Although
why
it
I've
wouldn't
got
give
this
me any
7-6.
answers to my thing that happened.
Yeah, you're just screwed, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know. I was
Just
just
gotta
maybe I was
accept
just
that.
tired and dumb. That's all it was.
Just tired, man.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
yeah.
think there's something to yours. You had something with yours. I'd be super curious to find out what it is.
If it's just me. Yeah.
That'd be the second time something crazy's happened with you, Nick.
That is true. That is true. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to know. Maybe I'm blocking it on purpose.
Man, you gotta know, Nick. You've got to.
Well, our first live episode, or our first in-person episode, that's what's going to happen. Hypnotos, we'll hire one.
I feel like one day, Nick, we're going to go around the country of the US of A and the good old US Junior of Canada. And we're just going to have a live show.
Get hypnotized every night.
Go with you.
Every night, hypnotized. I don't know if you can overdose on that or something.
I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to tell stories of that time that Bigfoot abducted me in the woods for 6 days.
Oh, yeah. What a nightmare. Good thing you ate your tobacco.
It's a good thing. We never got out of that one alive.
That's right. That's right.
It'd be interesting. I would be interested to see what yours is, because I feel like there's got to be something to yours.
Yeah, there's something up with it. I'm from a really weird part of the world, I think. I think there's a lot of stuff that happens here.
Yeah.
I think so. But on the good side, thank goodness we escaped that light and nothing happened to us at all.
Does the next segment cover what they think happened?
It might. No, that's the end. They're just like, whew, we escaped the end.
Got away.
That's it. That's the end of the story. It was spooky, but
that's crazy.
We don't know anything else about it.
I don't know how anyone could think that.
Yeah.
That
if you're
makes no
listening,
sense.
this isn't the end. So don't tune in now.
Yeah, this is not the end. I think we should play the next segment and see what really happens, Nick.
It wasn't until 2 years later that an accident would reveal more to this story. Jim was working as an electrician's apprentice and had been asked by a friend to come check out the wiring at his house he was building. Jim opened a door thinking it was a utility closet, but was instead a landing to the basement where the stairs had not been built yet. He suffered a serious fall, landing in a seated position. The impact of his body pushed his brainstem forward to strike the front of his skull. Along with back trauma, Jim now suffered from some brain damage that caused epilepsy. It was at this time that he began to suffer absolutely terrifying nightmares. He hesitates in interviews to call them nightmares as he felt certain they were some kind of memory. Jim was now certain of one thing: they had not escaped the beam at all that night. He was positive that the nightmares were memories of his time on an alien spacecraft and experiments that had been done upon him. It was decided that he would undergo hypnotic regression therapy so they could recover his memories. Each time the story filled in more and more pieces. It was a long process for Jim, however. He would become so terrified and pained by these sessions, they had to keep putting him under and pulling him out repeatedly, or he would drive himself into seizures. Jim sketched the beings that had experimented on him. Their heads were almost like ants, but had no mandibles or antennae. They were very thin and almost fragile looking. They were as tall or taller than the average human. They had very skin-tight clothing, almost like a skier would have. He remembered some of the devices as well that was used upon him. What he remembered most is the abject terror.
The what?
So, abject terror. Do you know what that is?
No clue what that is.
So, abject terror is basically being afraid up to the point, and maybe even beyond, where you're almost so scared that you could die from fear.
Oh, okay.
That's abject terror. Like a thing they often say about sleep paralysis is it triggers a part of your brain that if you weren't paralyzed, you might die from that amount of fear.
Oh, wow.
So it's quite bad. Now, he was going in and out of, they had to keep putting him under hypnosis and bringing him back out because he would get so scared he'd drive himself into seizures.
That's insane.
Yeah. I think the real insane thing is 2 years went by and they these guys just went on about their lives, never really even thought about it. You know, those aliens almost got away with it. But, and you know what? They probably never would have thought about it again if the guy hadn't had that accident, which just messed up something in his brain.
That just seems so absurd to me.
Right. That you could block something so deep and not think anything of it. But we know that that does happen with trauma victims.
We do know. It happens often.
Yeah. Like,
very often.
Here's some really wild stuff that can happen. Like, people have like severe trauma or childhood trauma. They can get DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, where they almost fragment into, or they do fragment into separate identities to protect themselves from these memories.
Yep, I've seen that before. That happens to a lot of victims of SA.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. They did some movies about it, like Split and stuff, which, while being very good movies, didn't do very much for people who actually have this disorder, because I'm sure it made people afraid of them and stuff. Sure. But it's, but it's like a defense mechanism. Like, our brain, more than anything, wants to protect us from things that would harm us, right?
That is correct. That would be my assumption of that. You know, but it makes me wonder, how many things do we not know about because people just flat out do not remember it?
Right. No, a lot. And our memories are unreliable too. Yes. Like, they did experiments on people where, well, I can think of two scenarios. They did one experiment on people where they purposely walked them by a faked alien crash site.
Yeah.
And then asked them all about it later. All the people that experienced the same things, but they got a whole bunch of different stories. Like, there was a little alien man and stuff like that. And another example of that is my friend actually tried to pull a prank on me, or an experiment on me, because he took psychology. And he did this thing where if you ask someone about a plausible thing that happened, and you keep insisting that it happened and giving them additional details one at a time, that they'll eventually remember what you're telling them as if it was their own memory. Have you ever heard of that before?
I've heard of people that said that it could happen, but I've never seen a case where they've proven that it's happened.
My friend did it a few times, and he had some success with it because this is how it would go. He'd be like, or I'll pretend I'm him. I'm like, hey, Bert, do you remember that time where we went to the county fair? And you'd just be like, nah, I don't remember it. I'm like, yeah, you must remember it. It was the time that we went to the county fair and we went into the animal barn and they had that great big horse. And you'd be like, I just can't remember that kind of thing. And he says, I don't know how you can't remember it. Like when you walked up to the horse, it stomped and snuffed at you and scared you. I can't believe you don't remember this. And you basically add a little more detail each time. And eventually the person adopts that as their own memory because they believe they must have experienced it.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. You should try it on someone. It's interesting. It does work sometimes.
I'm going to have to do that, but figure out how to incorporate it into my line of business. Hey,
yeah. So
do y'all remember that time you subscribed to the channel? Oh, you don't?
Yeah.
How do you not remember that? It was on your favorite episode. Remember the episode that you contacted us in the comments about and you was like, man, I can't believe you guys made a video on this? What do you mean?
Right.
It was a comment where you said your mom did the same thing, but the Bigfoot took her for 6 days. How do you not remember that? That's absurd.
Exactly. And yeah, that's the time that you subscribed and you told us how awesome we are.
That's crazy. You never once told us about how bad we were. You told us how great we were.
Yeah. Don't you remember? That's crazy.
Yeah. We never called you a nerd. Yeah. Never. Never.
No, but that's, I mean, this is all weird mind stuff that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And it all goes
I picture
back
it like Scooby-Doo too. Like they're like the aliens are like, we would have got away with it too if it wasn't for that darn fall.
What do you think we should do, Scoob?
Man, you got to practice that. I can tell.
You know,
you must have.
I've got kids, man.
Yeah.
Zoink, Scoob. Oh man, you know, but it does make me wonder though. With all of this brain stuff. If you think about it, and this is the way I always looked at the brain. Well, I take this back. Right. It's the way I look at the brain now.
Right.
What if, like in the Matrix, we're just plugged into one big simulation machine?
Right.
When people's doing these things, they're essentially causing a virus or like a hack in that Matrix system. That could be what dreams is. That could be what
it could be.
These regressed memories are.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
like there's no reason. We don't truly know.
There's a lot. Yeah, we don't understand that entirely. Like we know that we've got this spongy piece of meat that electricity jumps around and you know, sometimes it gets hurt and it can heal itself and sometimes it gets hurt and it can't. And sometimes it looks fine and it doesn't work right. And
well, it goes back to a lot. It goes back to all these stories. It's like the energy just stops, but it doesn't stop for a while after. Like there's still a ton of brain activity after you pass away. And it's like, is that just setting us up to go to whatever the other realm is that we're supposed to be able to go to? Like, because when we die,
transition thing.
Yeah, because when we die, there's a part of our brain that opens up that is used for certain things that we use when we're living, like it lights up. I just watched something on this not that long ago, and it talked about scientifically they were confused because there was no reason for us to have that much of a heat map lighting up on our brain in that specific section.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because I
wonder what evolutionary benefit that could have, or...
I don't know. It didn't go into all that. The guy that I was watching, and again, it's going to do it based on what I'm looking for. But what they were initially trying to do is to try to determine how little brain activity and how quickly the brain shuts off after you take your last breath. That was the scientific study. And then what they figured out was your brain starts, as your organs start shutting down, it starts shutting down. So your brain waves go down and down and down. And then when you die, it's very minute. And then the moment you're clinically dead or shortly after, it spikes all the way up.
Okay.
And
it's
then
like
it
a
does
last ditch restart effort or something, maybe? Or
well, what they said was the part that lights up is the part that's used for a certain part of our conscious brain that we use to do things in our life every day.
Okay.
But it's also in the same part that there would be no reason for it to activate. But it does that for like, I think it's like 5 or 10 minutes straight. So it's constantly firing, constantly firing. Yeah, it does it for a long time. Well, that's not a long time, but a long time to me, that's a long time. And then eventually it starts shutting itself down.
Right. I picture it like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it reminds me of like they're pulling the plug from here and putting it in over here.
Right. I was going to say it reminds me of Star Trek where they have problems and they have to keep shutting down certain systems to try and preserve the most important ones kind of thing. But yeah, like, well, man, you say 10 minutes or whatever isn't a lot of time, but if that's your last 10, that's a long time. Correct. That is a long time.
Or what about those people that die and they see like themselves over top of their bed?
Yeah. And, I've heard of that.
There's actually a doctor that I was listening to. He was a atheist, not agnostic, a complete atheist.
Right.
And he subscribed the vast majority of his career of, well, you know, unfortunately, when we die, that's all there is. But luckily, we don't know because once we're dead, there's nothing there. And he had a patient and he knew the patient was pretty bad off, but he did not necessarily, he didn't know when it's going to happen. He hadn't ate.
Right.
So he's like, hey, I'm going to go down to the cafeteria real quick, get something to eat, and I'm going to come right back. And, you know, as this is going on, we're going to keep moving. Well, while he's out, the patient died.
Okay.
Like shortly after. When he came back to the room, they're like, oh, the patient died. We was able to get them back. You know, we was able to get the whatever it's called, the paddles on them and bring them back.
Right.
The person was in a coma for a while, like a few days, and then they got him out of the coma. It was a woman. And the doctor said, I went from a atheist to someone who was complete believer in something. I don't know what the something is. Right. And he said when he was talking to the patient, when he went to the room, the patient said, hey, was you able to get that stain out of your doctor's uniform? And he goes, what are you talking about? They said, you spilt that soup. You spilt that soup from the cafeteria on your shirt. And he said, nobody knew that. And he said what really tripped him out was because sometimes it could be a case where a brain is still working, where, you know, whatever it is, but maybe something says something that triggers it. So when he came back, maybe someone said, hey, there's this soup that's on your shirt. That person's still retaining it. He goes, but there's a problem. I had an overcoat on, and when I saw the stain, I didn't want anyone to see it. So I tightened it around and nobody knew there was a stain there. So it's like
she followed him to lunch.
That's what's weird, but it's like, what is that? Like, is that, you know, are you like stuck and then you're trying to whatever that, I don't know. It's very curious, whatever that other realm is.
Yeah, I like to believe, and you know, I've got no necessary evidence for this, but I like to believe that something happens.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that show Midnight Mass?
No.
It's from the same people that made The Haunting of Hill House, and those others in that series. I don't know if you've seen them or not.
I know of them, but I've not seen them.
They're very good. Anyway, there's I don't want to give away too much, but twice throughout the series, this fella asks a girl what she thinks dying is like. And she gives one of the most beautiful, the second time she answers it, she gives one of the most beautiful answers I've ever seen. And I'm not going to try to ruin it here, but I suggest everyone go listen to it on YouTube after you listen to our whole episode, by the way. Don't leave now.
Don't leave now.
But it's one of the most beautiful visions of dying that I've ever seen. But the other thing is one that I like to think about, if there isn't something else after this, which I think there is. Mark Twain said something else that I like as well. And he said, I was dead for thousands of years before I was born, and it didn't bother me in the slightest. So why should it now?
It's Dorothy Eady.
Yeah, basically.
He just didn't know.
Yeah, he didn't know it. Or he did.
I don't know. The whole thing is very interesting to me. Mostly because of, I think, the experiences that I've had as time has progressed in my life. And I think that's what really makes me interested in the paranormal stuff, because it's like, what is that stuff? You know, where does that play in? How does that play? And I think that's why I get so mad when I find out something's fake.
Yeah.
It really infuriates me, because it's like, I buy into whatever it is.
Right.
And I'm like, maybe this explains for me what mine is. And then I find out it's fake, you know?
Yeah.
Because, like, spoiler alert, on my podcast this week, this comes out on Wednesday, I don't believe the story. And it's a famous one.
Yeah. I don't know if this is too much information, but I'll share it anyway. Earlier in my life, I was, I was a religious person, because that's just what you did in a small town. Like, I never knew there was any other way of being. I didn't think about it. And when I started to have my doubts about it, and I started to get into the paranormal and stuff, I was like, if I could just have one absolute experience with a ghost or something like that, that would make me believe again, right? Now, I felt like I've had some experiences, and it does make me believe there's something else out there. But I didn't really sort of kick me back into that whole thing. But I think for some people, believing in ghosts and believing in the paranormal, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter whether it's true or not, but people believing in that kind of stuff sort of affirms their beliefs. It says, well, if there's a ghost, there's a soul. If there's a soul, there's a heaven. You know, I think some people think that way. And they might be right.
See,
I don't know.
See, I don't think that way at all.
No?
No.
Like, wouldn't it lend credence to it?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. The reason I say that is, obviously, I have my belief system.
Right.
I just want to experience another paranormal thing because I've experienced it before.
Right.
And it's like anything else, right? Like when you're in your occupation and you experience one thing that you've never experienced before, and you go, what the heck was that?
Right.
And you wait for the opportunity to experience it again so you can understand it more. That's my current position. That's what I want to understand. Why did I see what I saw?
Right.
And it's not just one time. I've had a few occurrences.
Right.
And I want to understand the why.
Right. You know,
but even if I knew it was real, which I don't think I'll ever be able to say, yes, this moment is real.
Yeah.
But for me, it wouldn't validate my belief system. Because I still don't know how it's applied. Like people tell me all the time, how can you talk about all these things and then say that you're a religious person? I don't know how God created any of this stuff, right?
Right.
He could have used any kind of system to do that.
Yeah. I guess for me, it was like the supposition that a ghost is a human soul trapped on Earth. So I thought, well, if I knew that that was real, I'd have to, by proxy, believe that the soul's real. That's how I used to think.
I guess I can understand that.
You know, and I mean, that makes sense. But I just don't know if I'll ever know that what I have seen or what I will see is what I think I'm seeing or have seen.
That's why I said when we go ghost hunting at some point, and eventually even myself personally on my channel, I might get to the point to where I want to do some ghost hunting.
Right.
My goal is to put everything up in its unaltered state, still make a video that's edited so that other people can go back like me and say, I wish I could see the unedited so that I can validate myself. And that's what I want to do, because nobody does that, which tells me, and I hate to say this, I think a lot of what's put out is bullcrap. I don't think it's legit. I think they're doing things to make people watch. Like I don't think that all these haunted houses have all this stuff that occurs all the time. Right. I think it's occasional. You're lucky if it happens while you're there. But I also think that it's the person that opens up the door. I truly do believe
and
that.
I think we've seen a lot of cases that would support that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if people in this, I know there's some shysters out there that like are out to scam people and you know, make up happenings, but I think a lot of people are just like, they throw away what they find uninteresting and only keep the banger stuff. I don't know if all those people have like ill intentions, but keeping it all and letting people go through the unedited stuff would be a valuable resource for people, I think, to make up their own minds.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of people on YouTube that have fake ghost channels. Like they're going to places and they're like, man, did you all see that? Ooh, that ghost just walked through there. And it's like, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. Yeah. They add their music. They add their ambiance. They add, I mean, that's what I do. I do sound design on the back end of all of our stuff. I can make it sound however I want it to sound, right? It's no differently than now we have the music while we're talking, which you guys can clearly hear now. Yeah. I could make this sound angry. I could make this sound jovial. And it's all based on sound design. Right. And I think a lot of these YouTube channels, that's what they do. They build onto whatever they want you. And let's be honest. Right. If you had a YouTube channel where every single week it was just you walking around the house with ghost equipment, you never caught anything. Yeah. Eventually people would stop watching. Yeah. Versus you might catch them at first, but it's not going to be for very long. Right. But then again, there's people that every single place they go to is super haunted and super spooky. And it's like, is it entertainment or is that legit at this point? You know? Yeah. Well, it's but like it all ties into this stuff. Like I think it was Zach Baggins got accused of that quite a bit, of sensationalizing things, and it's like, and I hate to say it now. I hate to say it now, and I hope this doesn't cost us in the long run. Sam and Colby, these two very entertaining young guys. I can't believe their YouTube channel, because every single time they go somewhere, there's something going on. And it's like they just did that Conjuring house for Halloween. And they had that, you know, Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters? Yeah. For me, Ghost Hunters was probably one of the most believable shows in the early days, when it was Grant and Jason and then his team. I think Steve Gonzalez was one of them. Like I I trusted what they did, and I trust Jason Hawes. But his daughter and her husband works for the Conjuring House.
Oh, okay.
But they have this system where they hold hands, and they can talk to the ghost, and the ghost makes knocking noises with its feet.
Okay.
And I look at that and I go, for me, I can't buy into it. Like I feel like that's completely fake. But I feel like Satori is their name. Satori, and I can't remember the guy's name. And like they got caught kinda because some skeptics for the Sam and Colby channel, they acknowledged that every time they would do a knock, the guy was wearing shorts, and you could see the tendons in his legs expand every time there was knocks.
So he was doing something there.
Yeah, but what Satori said, which is his wife, was, well, he had cancer and he can't really do that. And if he popped a joint, it wouldn't pop back in and stuff. And it's like, okay, but every time this knocks, that happens. And if you remember the Fox sisters, they did the same thing. They were using their double jointed toes to make noises.
Yeah.
And it's like, this song and dance has already happened.
Right. I mean, not to mention in the modern age, you could have a little transmitter in the toe of your shoe that you're doing. Like it doesn't have to, you don't have to be double jointed. You don't have to have any of that stuff.
But if you watch the videos, you can see his leg will like expand.
Yeah.
Right when the knocking happens. And you could turn the audio off and just tell someone, I'm going to watch the screen. You're going to go knock, knock, knock. And if someone's got the headphones on, they go, that's dead in line with exactly when that happens.
So their defense is just nah.
Yeah, they're just basically saying nah. And now they don't want to go in front of the camera. And what sucks is I love Jason Hawes. I think he's the most legit stand-up guy ever, but it's his daughter.
Right. Well, that puts him in a weird place then.
And on top of that, the guy was like, I figured this out. I had a near-death experience, and we found out when we touched hands that this was able to happen. And they're like, oh, so that's how you figured it out. But if you go back like 10 years before that, there was another video where he and another guy was walking through. This is way before Satori was there. They hear knocking, and they did the same method of the alphabet system.
Right.
Then too. And it's like, you're hurting the credibility of what I'm looking for. You're hurting people like me that wants to go out and do it legit.
Right.
So for whatever reason, right? I don't know what their reasoning is, but I don't know.
You know what I would have done? I would have said, okay, I want to do this experiment, but I'm going to put 2 pillows on the floor and I need you guys to stand on these while you do it.
Yeah.
And then if I still get the same level of knocking, then I'll be like, okay, I'm a little more believing now, but I bet you wouldn't.
Well, they made him switch shoes and they took him to a different location and it was able to work every time. But my thing is, there's like, well, you hear the knocking coming from upstairs and then downstairs and like it's all from all over the place. And I'm like, then set up tape recorders around in different spots and set them to the same decibel range and then see, is this a moving thing or is it all coming from one source at all points in time? That's a very easy thing to do. Yeah.
Well, I guess no one will ever get the chance now because since they
don't
have been accused of trickery, they don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
Now, in the real world, if you're accused of trickery and you're not tricking someone, you would definitely, prove yourself correct, right?
Because think about it. They talk about it all the time. If someone says you're guilty of something and you know you're innocent, you get defensive.
Right.
And you say, okay, well, if you don't think that's the case, if you think that it's not real, let's do it again. You can stand right here. Watch me.
Right.
You think it's my legs? Put the cameras on my legs.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. If you're sure you're not doing it, let them do any test they want to.
Correct.
Instead, the first time you get questioned, you're like, I'm never doing it again.
Exactly.
No,
that's what doesn't make
any
sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But
this all ties into exactly what we're talking about, because again, we're talking about interdimensional things. The whole regression thing, the way that it plays into all of this, it's all comes around full circle if you think about it.
Speaking of full circles, I can't believe, but I forgot to mention in the last segment, do you remember who they were talking to just as they were leaving the forest?
The guy, the ranger guy.
Yep, the park's ranger. It's a national park there.
Park Ranger National Park. So that again falls in line with our theories.
Yep. Weird things happen at all these national parks, which, I mean, we're not the first people to figure that out. But we do see a lot of existing paranormal things and unexplained things happening at these places as well.
We do see that quite often.
Yeah, so I think there's something to that.
That's insane.
But speaking of, so this guy has a terrible fall. So okay, let me dial it back a little bit here. This guy, basically none of these guys really talk about this. When they first get back, they're telling anyone who will listen, and they just get dismissed. And after 2 years, they're not really talking about it anymore. A guy falls, basically, imagine into a hard cement basement from the top of the stairs straight down, lands on his butt in a seated position. Has an injury so severe it causes him brain damage, and chronic pain. And then, would that be the time in your life that you might start making up stories from 2 years in the past? Just spontaneously at that point? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it undid whatever he did to his brain, undid whatever block that had been set up there, whether it was like alien anesthesia, like you said, or if there's some kind of mental programming that they can do. It stopped it, and he started to have memories, and he went to have them uncovered through hypnosis.
There's something to whatever that all is, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. There's something with our mind that, you know, we talk about all these things and we go, all these things fit, and we do it all the time. And I feel like whenever we talk about hypnosis or sleep or near-death experiences, or, you know, in this case, regression of memory or time lapse or sleep paralysis, it all goes back to the same thing. It always goes back to there's something in the brain that causes whatever all of these things are. And it makes me wonder again. I know I've said it before. It makes me feel like there's some type of programming of some sort.
Yeah, like the programming you might get in a simulation.
Right.
And a lot of people do believe in that theory, and not crackpots just like us, like actual scientists.
I mean, Elon
that's
Musk
where
said
we got
it not
this
that
from.
long ago. Yeah.
And
Elon Musk said it.
Yeah, a lot of other guys who are actually astrophysicists and that kind of stuff, they agree on that kind of thing. They think it's likely. Those kind of guys will never say anything 100%.
No,
which is smart on them, because that's the nature of reality. You can't say anything 100%.
Unless you're leaving comments on a YouTube channel. Because they love to say things like, this is absolutely true, and stuff like that. That's the only time you're able to do something like that.
Hey, you're really going hard on these guys.
I think
that moon episode did it.
I think it's so funny. It's funny to me. I can't help myself.
Well, other than that very specific scenario, you can't really be sure of anything. Not 100%.
No, it's impossible.
So he's starting to recover these memories at great personal cost because he gets so scared he has seizures. So they keep pulling him out, putting him back in, pulling him out, putting him back in. But eventually he gets the full story and he does a drawing. And the drawing is what we described earlier. Sort of like ant-like head, but without the mandibles, without antennas. So if you imagine that, and you can see pictures afterwards, that's pretty much the standard gray alien head. Pretty close. Great big eyes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sort of like, yeah. But he's not saying these are little men. Like they're regular person size or taller are on this ship, but they're very spindly. So that sort of falls in line with like science and stuff like that, because if you're in outer space, like you lose mass, like there's no gravity helping you build muscle and that kind of thing. So things that spend a lot of time in space, maybe even on like generational ships or something like that, they're going to be spindly. And they just do terrible things to him, experiments to him. And he's certain at this point that this happened. But how can he be 100% sure that this happened to him?
The only way is if he would have to have something inside of his body, like an implant or like a surgery. Sometimes people find like surgeries that can occur.
Yeah. Another good way might be though, is if he could get those other guys to have the regression therapy as well and see if they corroborate his story, because to him, they all got sucked up in that beam or whatever. So this didn't just happen to him. Are you interested in more of their story?
Of course. We got to know what goes on, Nick.
After recovering his memories, Jim needed to know if they were real. He practically demanded the others attend hypnotic regression therapy as well. They agreed. Jack remembered that the beam actually did hit the canoe. He recalled it as some kind of transport beam, and the next moment he knew he was on his back on a hard surface. He was paralyzed, but he could move his eyes. He could see to his left that the other 3 men were in the room with him, all sitting on benches. He wondered why he was laying there paralyzed, and they were sitting there, with blank stares not helping him. He tried to figure out the space he was in, but it was so bright, so very bright he couldn't see the walls themselves. Out of the light, he remembered 3 hazy figures come to each of his sides, and one standing at his feet. His drawing of the creatures, once they came into focus, matched Jim's almost exactly. He was terrified. He could only think of running, but still could not move.
So Jack was the next guy up. He agreed to this. He goes into hypnosis and he starts freaking out as well, because now he remembers that the beam brought them up into the ship. And what he remembers is laying on a hard surface, completely unable to move except for his eyes. So he can look around and see what's around him, but he can't do anything else. And out of the corner of his eyes off to the left, he sees the other 3 guys sitting on a bench, eyes straight forward, not moving, not saying anything. And into focus come 3 of these beings, one on each side of him, one at his feet. And they start to perform experiments on him. Now, he also drew these creatures afterwards, and they looked identical to the drawings that Jim had made in his sessions. So that is kind of weird, don't you think?
It's very weird. But if you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think about this quite often.
Yeah.
when we look at like what's that thing that they all go to now, all the rich people go to, the ayahuasca, is that what it's called?
The drug?
Retreats or whatever? Yeah.
Oh no. Oh, ayahuasca is a drug.
That's what I'm saying, where they go and do that drug and then they like get sick and all that, and then they say they have these out of body experiences and stuff like that. They had that one research where a group of people did it.
Right.
And they were in different parts because apparently you have to have someone there with you while you're getting sick.
Right.
And they basically make sure you don't die. Like that's the goal.
Yeah.
In which if someone was like, hey, you want to go do this? I'd be like, no, but whatever.
There's a better one anyway. I'll tell you about that after.
Perfect. What they found was there was one group, and it was science researchers that was looking at it. And these, I guess they're called shamans, I guess, where you can get some of these done. This person over here, in which those of you listening, multiple people far away that has no way of connecting, all saw each other on this trip or whatever they were on. And they were all talking to these beings. Now later, they was all able to recount the fact that I saw you there. Oh, and I saw you there and you were there. But what they found was the beings, they was able to talk to each other and explain that they all saw the same being.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, what they said was it would be impossible. And this was not a group of people that came together. These were separate people from separate things that all just happened to be there.
And sort of met up in their spirit journey.
Yeah,
like not in real life initially. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because you go, okay, if you're doing that, are you going to like a different dimension to where, you know, you're able to have these experiences? And if that's the case, who's to say that? And, you know, I guess I never really thought about this either. What if during an alien abduction, it's not that we're necessarily losing something, but instead we're going into a different dimension that kind of disconnects us from our own dimension?
Could very well be. That would sort of fall in line with the theories you've had about that.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it would be a disconnect. It's like you're there, but you're not.
Yeah. And a lot of those experiences are like that.
Yeah. Sleep paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Like I just did on my podcast, I just did Annabelle last week. And Lou, who was the boyfriend or fiance of, I think her name was Angie, he was in bed and he was they was planning a trip for the next day. They was trying to get away from everything. And he had a case of sleep paralysis. And out the corner of his eye, which it made me think of it when he was talking about that, out the corner of his eye, he saw the doll. And then he was able to watch the doll go to the foot of the bed and then it disappeared. Yeah. And he still wasn't able to move. And then he felt the bed starting to move. So he still had like that feeling. He could still understand what was going on. And then he felt the doll crawl up and then start choking him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. But it's
with alien. I was just gonna say, with alien abductions, a lot of times it comes with sleep paralysis.
Right.
And what they say a lot of the times is like they've returned you, but you're not completely out of the paralysis they put you in. Right, and you hear high pitched noise before or after the abduction. But him laying on that slab sounds just like sleep paralysis, which you could say sleep paralysis explains his experience, or the experience explains his sleep paralysis, one or the other.
Right. It's kind of like in the movies when we talk about, okay, if you, here's a great example, and this is a horrible example / perfect example. Back to the Future.
Yep.
Marty McFly goes back into the future, but he can't meet himself Because if he does, it'll erase him.
Right.
Right? Basically, what's happening is current age dimension Marty McFly going back to old Marty McFly causes a rift in that life, which destroys something. What if an alien, or in this case, we're talking about a demonic doll, for it to manifest, it's either bringing you into its dimension or you're going in, it's coming to your dimension. It's one of the two.
Right.
In both occasions, demonic or whether it's a UFO. What if you're always under sleep paralysis? Because when it pulls you into that dimension, your body might be going.
Right.
But your mind is not fully connected.
You know, I can buy that. What I'd say, though, is if it's sleep paralysis, I'd say you must be being pulled into theirs. And that, if that were the case, it would also explain time loss. For example, where those kids were able to occupy the same space as the adults on the side of that lake.
Yeah.
If one group or the other was pulled into this other dimension, like you're saying. Interesting.
It's an interesting concept. Yeah. Because I always
that's
wonder
worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, because it's like, why is it that if we have sleep paralysis, it happens so often in all of these stories? UFOs, and when we're talking about demonic beings.
Yeah. Both of those do have that in common.
They both have it in common. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And I don't know. But again, we talk about extra dimensions. Like,
right.
What if they're on that dimension? But like, we don't know if a ghost is, if we're able to see a ghost or a demon or whatever it is. I think with a ghost, it's different. It's just there's a rift in whatever that is. But like with a demon, what if it's living in this other dimension and it's pulling you into it? So we think we're in our dimension, right? But we're not. It's pulling, kind of like Vecna in Stranger Things.
Yeah, exactly.
He pulls him into his dimension, right?
Now, with demonic possessions and stuff, do we ever get time loss in those stories? I don't recall. We can. So, okay.
The case that I'm covering this week, which I don't necessarily believe the story, but there was one thing that I found extremely interesting. The woman said that when she was under demonic possession, she felt like she was in a dark room and she could hear things that was going on and she could feel things going on, but she could not control anything that was going on. But also there's a story of like, the devil made me do it. 1 second, he remembers standing in front of the guy. The next minute, he's in the woods.
So that does happen there too, then. Interesting.
Yeah, but what we don't see is, in the case of the devil made me do it, for those that doesn't know, the landlord became friends with the guy. He stabs him multiple times.
Right.
And then runs into the forest. So for him, he's in the house. Yeah. And then he's outside. But for everyone else, he just stabbed that guy and now he's running. So it's like, did he go into a different dimension and this entity then came into ours?
Right.
Or what? But the other crazy part of that
or did they swap for that time?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I want to keep that in mind for like future episodes when we come across this kind of thing again.
Correct, yeah. In which I come into it a decent amount on mine because all I've been dealing with here lately is family hauntings.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Family hauntings.
Yeah, Doc, you just can't. Listen, you can't get away from anymore.
Yep. It's just something people do as a family.
You know, you gotta share the experiences with everyone.
So, if you were a betting man, would you say that the rest of the guys are going to have any experiences, or they're just like, nah?
Oh, for sure. They're definitely going to have experiences. Totally going to have them.
Do you want to listen to see if that's the case or not?
Absolutely.
Charles also agreed. Charles, under hypnosis, was back in the canoe on the shores of the lake almost as if it were happening again. He is in total disbelief of everything that he was seeing. It was too uncomfortable and too painful to fully recall. His descriptions also matched the other two. He further elaborated that all their instruments were suited to 4 digits. The creatures had 4 fingers with 2 on each side of their hand that folded inward, so everything they used were crafted to accommodate this. He remembered being handled like a specimen in a lab, also unable to move. The same with Chuck. At the beginning of the experiment, the hypnotist and men decided that none of them would share their recovered memory until all 4 had completed all their sessions. So, they couldn't color each other's stories. When they were all called into the office to discuss findings, they were amazed, and also afraid to find out that their drawings, descriptions, and stories had all matched. The 4 men had a shared experience, which would have explained the time lost in their huge fire burning down. There were more mysteries that are buried deep in their minds that they have not been able to recover. When asked how long they thought they were under hypnosis, all said 15 or 20 minutes. The time had actually been 2 to 3 hours.
So that last bit I thought you might find interesting. There seems to be some time discrepancies even between their memories and the hypnosis.
Right. Yeah, that would make sense that would be the occurrence.
Yeah. The other thing too, and I found this is weird because I don't know if I've heard other stories about this or not, but they had 4 fingers opposed like this. And I guess if you're not watching this, you can't see this, but they sort of curl inwards, which is interesting. But the most interesting thing, all 4 men decided beforehand they're not sharing any of their experiences or anything about what they're talking about until they're finished. Now, I'm going to put the disclaimer up that if this is a hoax, it's real easy because they could have just planned it all out from the beginning. If it's not a hoax, what they accomplished was unbelievable because they all drew the same pictures with their different skill levels, and they all had the same experiences.
That is very interesting.
I just had to say that part about how it would be easy to fake if they had decided they were going to do that.
But it makes you go back and think, let's say this is all legit, 100% legit. I would be curious when the one guy that we talked about said that he was laying on the ground, he had sleep paralysis, and the other 2 were sitting on the bench.
Other 3, sorry.
Other 3 was sitting on the bench.
There's 4 guys. Yep.
It's interesting that those 3 are just sitting there like mindless cattle. You know what I mean?
That's how I pictured it too, oddly enough. They're like just dazed, grazing animals. They're not thinking, they're not helping each other. They're not even looking over at them. It's like they're perfectly zoned out until they're on the table. And then they can look around and stuff like that. But before that, it's almost like they're on pause. Is what
you know what that sounds like to a degree?
What?
And you would know this, you're a game developer. When you bring a character into a game, what's it in?
Like T-pose. Ooh.
It's in the T-pose, right? Yeah, we got crazy.
Exactly.
It's in the T-pose.
Yeah.
Every single game, when you're creating a character, they're all in a T-pose.
Yeah. That's just because it's easier to put a skeleton in them that way, by the way, in case anyone's interested.
But think about it. All 3 guys are sitting on a bench the same exact way. It's almost like they dropped and dragged these guys onto the ship. Yeah. And they're not connected to anything yet.
Yeah. It's kind of weird too. And it's funny, once they almost plug them in on the slab, all of a sudden they're like, why are these other guys not helping me? Like, what's going on here? Like, this is terrible. And then they take them off and they suddenly don't have any memories beyond that point again. Only when they're on the slab. Do they have any recollections, even under hypnosis?
Right.
Isn't that weird?
It's very weird. But again, it makes me go back to this interdimensional thing. It's like we have this dimension we're in. We go to another dimension. It's like we become disconnected.
Right.
So it's like for them, it's like they're T-posing us. You go here, you go here, you go here. Stay.
Yeah. Yeah. But then when they get
And
someone
like
where
they
they want
connect us
them,
to
start
Matrix.
the scene. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like they plug them into a matrix, though.
Yeah. Or they only
They plug the
restart
thing back
part
in.
of their brain. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Because in the Matrix,
I
when
don't
they're
know.
in those little pods, they can't move around or anything. It's just their
Correct.
brain that's active.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's
It's
interesting.
very similar.
Yeah. Something to that. Because now, if you think
100%.
back, search your memories, and every abduction story you've ever heard, they only remember what happens on the slab. They never remember being walked to it or being carried to it. If there's more than one person, they don't remember being swapped.
Correct.
Like, interesting.
It is very interesting.
That's the kind of thing that all these stories have in common. But if you were telling it, you wouldn't think to include that.
Right.
Interesting. Well, all these guys told exactly that story. All of them drew the same picture. Or similar pictures.
It does make you wonder, though, like if it's an elaborate hoax, kudos to them.
Right.
But I don't think
Weird
that
to
it
wait
was.
that long.
For sure.
Because you've lost
Very
the initial
weird.
buzz. Like, the longer it is after, the less likely people are to believe you.
Exactly.
Still wish they had gone back and tried to find those kids and put them
for
under
sure.
hypnosis. Like, you never hear more
But
about
think
that.
about it. They went 2 years
Yeah.
before they figured it out themselves.
Yeah.
So
Well, they probably don't
who
even
knows
know
how
these
long
people's
kids
names
went.
or addresses.
Yeah, for sure. But
Yeah.
if you're the kids hearing this in the future and you're like, wait a second, we're those kids.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think they would say something?
They probably would. Although if I was like a teenager or something, like, I wouldn't know how to go about necessarily getting a hypnotist or anything like that. I might just tell my friends, yeah, that was me. I don't remember if anything happened. It was pretty weird though.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, like, I had that weird experience as an adult and I've never gone to get hypnotized. So, and I've not really contacted anyone about it. So that's
Yeah,
just
that's
how things
crazy.
get lost. Stories get lost in time, I guess.
That's true. You're
Mhm.
right. You're not wrong about it.
Yeah. Like, I'm
makes
real
you
curious
think, though.
about that. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I would really like to know what happened with those kids, what they
Yeah.
saw, what they felt, what they experienced, what their
Right.
thoughts are.
Yeah.
Like, that could
Like,
be a
are they
game changer.
traumatized in any way, or, you know, do they have
Right.
repressed memories that they're not in touch with? Do they have nightmares about it? Like, well, this is stuff we don't know. I
Correct.
looked around, but I couldn't find any information on it. In fact, every time people tell this story, they leave this whole part out, except when you hear the 4 guys tell it themselves, or 3 guys tell it themselves. They include it, and that's why I had to rewrite it. Yeah.
That's interesting. Huh.
Yep.
That's pretty
And I
cool,
think that's
actually.
interesting enough. Yeah, I think it's interesting enough to include, so I wasn't going to go live without it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think that's the key to kind of brings this whole thing kind of around full circle.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But that's
I-
their experiences.
I know that with Barney and Betty Hill,
Mm-hmm.
there was a series of things that was brought back to them when they was under their regression hypnosis
Mm-hmm.
that they also didn't remember.
Right.
It makes me want to go back and look at the other famous cases and see what their experiences were.
Yeah, I've got the top 10, and I'll ping you that link right afterwards so you can look at them. Because we just discussed right now the 10th and the 1st. Because Betty and Barney Hill were number 1. That's the most documented one. And this is the top.
And then the other
10.
one's the dude that was in the forest. What's his name? Starts with an R.
I think it's like
Ramsfield or something.
Well, I know there's the Travis Walton one or whatever.
That one, yeah. There's that one.
The Fire in the Sky one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other ones that I hadn't necessarily heard about, but I want to look more into them now.
Yeah, because again, it's data.
Yeah, exactly.
I look at this all as data.
Right. And you can't have too much of that, especially if you're trying to make decisions on what's reality and what's not.
Especially if it's deceptive.
Well, that's right. Reality is so deceptive. It's almost like there's a reason we called it this.
Exactly. I see there's a minute and 17 seconds left. Is that like your conclusion?
Yep, that's the conclusion, but it does have some important information on it. Like most times we do my episodes, the last part's not really important. This time it is.
Sure, yeah. Just
so do you want to listen to that?
Oh, man. Yes.
The men's experience had changed them profoundly. For some reason, the men lost all interest in their creative hobbies pre-abduction, but developed strange obsessions with mathematics, ancient architecture, and biology. Jack began creating odd 3D geometry with paper and strings, things he had never seen before. The men since had gone on to tell their stories on many popular TV shows. Repeatedly, the men passed polygraph exams whenever it was asked of them with no hesitation. It is often said that everyone who meets them feel they are being honest. Unfortunately for their shared credibility, Chuck Rack would recant his story, claiming on different occasions they had taken drugs or that he had lied to profit financially. Could this be an elaborate hoax, or was Chuck simply tired of the negative publicity these cases can often bring? While we may never know for certain, the case, blind experiments, polygraphs, and testimony make this one of the best documented cases of alien abduction in history. What do you believe?
I can tell you that I can 100% say that I think a lot of times when there are these cases of whatever it may be, paranormal activity or, I mean, UFOs is paranormal activity, but, I'm talking more along the lines of like hauntings and stuff like that. A lot of times the family will go public and then a lot of them will pull back and they'll go, it wasn't necessarily real or whatever. And I think it's because they take so much heat.
They do. They really do.
And they're like, I just want this to go away. I don't even want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah. Even from your supporters, like if we believed in something like this, us and 10,000 other people are trying to get them to interview us to tell the same story they've told 1,000 times before. You can't tell who supports you and who wants to rake you over the coals. All this kind of stuff. It just gets tiresome. So.
Oh, for sure.
So he recanted. And on various occasions he said, we were doing drugs at the time. We wanted to promote our businesses with this story and all that kind of stuff, which he says he wants to do that, but he's not the one who decided to come forward after 2 years. Anyway, so he recanted, but he's got various stories why they did it. But I want to go back in that narrative a little bit. I find it very interesting. All the guys had creative hobbies before this incident, but after that, they lost all interest in them. They start doing weird 3D geometry with strings and nails and pieces of paper, stuff that they'd never seen before, never been interested in before. They're into ancient archaeology, all this kind of stuff. One guy becomes obsessed with biology and studying the human mind and all these kind of things. Just all wild stuff like that. Complete switch of their interests in lives after this.
Yeah.
Which I found quite interesting too. But on top of that, they submitted to polygraphs whenever people asked them to. Any tests they could do, anything, and they were always passed. They always passed without question.
Wow.
But despite all that, despite being able to pass all these tests and stuff, the last guy recanted. He said, nah, it was all a lie.
I think he was under too much pressure and he was like, nah, I don't want any part of this anymore.
I think about that sometimes. Like, if I had an experience, would I want to make that the rest of my life?
Right.
Like, would I want to talk about one thing for the rest of my life? It's not even an interest or a hobby. It's something that happened to me and something that wasn't really positive.
That's true.
Like, if you had a horrible car accident, would you like that to be the rest of the only thing you talked about for the next 40 years?
I wouldn't.
No, me neither. It's not a good life for these people.
No, it's definitely not. And I think that, that definitely goes back to explaining that I don't think that a lot of these people want to deal with that anymore. So they're like, I'm kind of done talking about this. That never happened. Or, they'd almost rather be known as a drug head.
Yeah. Or a liar.
Than to be like, no, I had this experience. Exactly.
Yeah. Because we all know,
a lot.
Like, there's been cases in the past where people are like, I just don't want to talk about this anymore. And who leaves them alone?
Right.
Nobody. Right. So their only chance is to say, well, I lied. I was doing drugs. To ruin their own character just to get out of that situation. That's what they turn to.
Which is pretty sad to think that you'd have to do that. It's just...
Well, it's just the
sad thing.
Nature of how people are. Like, if you think about famous people love famous people, but the thing they love best about famous people is when they fall or when they have bad things happen, or if they're in a scandal. People love that even more. Like, we like to have 100%. Idols and then destroy them.
Correct.
So,
and really that happens all the time.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
Absolutely. Like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't know if I'd come forward if I could prove something like that. Maybe I'd just tell people I know, or maybe tell it on a small podcast where not a ton of people are going to hear that, at least in the immediate future.
Which is a good reminder. If you've had an experience and you would like to come to a small podcast that only has 2,000 some people, welcome to Deceptive Reality. My name is Bert and this is Nick. And between just me, you, Nick, 2,000-ish people.
2,000 of your closest friends?
Closest friends. Listen, hey. We can have conversations about what you got going on.
That's right.
You'll feel better. Listen, we will do that for you. Okay, this isn't for us. This is for you.
Yeah, and we'll share our experiences too. It's like a support group.
Yeah, support group.
Yeah.
We're basically all in it together. Just me, Nick, you, and 2,000-ish people.
That's right. We're a club, a small club.
Small club.
Yeah.
But for everyone else out there, wherever you're listening to our podcast, or if you're watching us on the YouTube machine, what do you think about this story? Do you think we're far off? Do you think that there's something to it? Do you think maybe there's something we're not thinking about? Do you know something about the story that we don't know?
Especially that.
If so, comment. I'm almost scared saying this. Comment down below.
That's right. I want to know. I want to know.
I think we'd be safe on this. There's no moons in this one, Nick, so I think we'd be safe.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm never talking about the moon again.
This is back to absurdity. I'm never talking about the moon again. I'm never talking about it. I was so excited for that.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I'm just kidding. I liked that a lot, but I knew it was going to be controversial.
I liked it, but man, of all the things we talked about, I did not think that would be our controversial episode. I really didn't think so.
I kind of thought so. But you know what? It's fun to smack a wasp nest, but eventually you're going to get stung.
That is true. That is true. We've smacked quite a few.
Yeah, that's right.
We've smacked quite a few. Also, wherever you're listening to our podcast, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Rate us wherever you're listening to the podcast. Above and beyond that, I think we've kind of nailed this. We've kind of explained what's happened with this one.
Yeah. And
I think we've kind of won.
Yeah, we did. And we related it to our main overarching theory.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
Well, let's call it a day.
Until we catch y'all on the next podcast, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And walking them doggone sunflowers.